maybe he slips to the Cardinals pick in the third round. He seems like the type of project that the Cardinals would do really well with.
Welcome into another episode of the Viva Albertos podcast. I am your host, Jake Wood, as always, and joined by fellow writer for the site, Scott Plaza. We are tonight joined by a very special guest, very happy to introduce to Cardinal Nation, if you don't already follow him. His name is Joe Doyle. He is the founder and creator of Overslot Baseball. Joe has over 10 years of experience writing in the baseball industry. Joe started focusing on draft content in 2018. That's correct, Joe?
Yeah.
2018, and spent multiple years as the director of MLB draft content at Prospects Live. He is Scout School certified and has certifications from various places in terms of both hitting and pitching evaluation. Joe founded Overslot Baseball in December of 2022. Originally as a podcast, he launched his successful website, overslotbaseball.com, in July of this past year. You can also follow Joe on X at Joe Doyle MILB. Joe, man, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking some time out and joining us.
One hell of an intro, Jake. That's my entire life story.
Hey, we got to make sure that everyone knows that, like, you're the dude, you're the cream of the crop. So, like, you know, you've put in the work, so you deserve the accolades.
From your mouth to God's ears.
So let's jump right into it, since we're a little bit limited here for time. A couple months ago, you talked about something that caught my attention, and I heard something. I heard Lance Brozdowski cover this topic fairly recently as well, which I couldn't wait to dig into with you. The upcoming CBA, you both talked about your expectation that much like after the last negotiation, another level of the minor leagues is going to be axed by owners potentially, likely the low A level. What do you think the potential likelihood of that is, and what impact could that have on the game long term, and how do you foresee that affecting draft strategy in 2026?
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to affect draft strategy at all. I love the way that Lance talks about it. Lance says, he calls it developmental off-ramping, which I think is a beautiful way to say it. The talent congregation in college baseball right now is such that many of the quote-unquote best players are playing in the same conference. And so if you look at that conference, the SEC, and to a certain extent the Big 12 and the Big 10 a little bit, you can look at that as low A. You can look at that as, you know, these guys are seeing 92 every night. They're seeing breaking balls every night. They're seeing pretty advanced stuff. And if college baseball is doing the heavy lifting and getting that development portion done, then you can just take them right to high A in Major League Baseball. Now, one thing that I don't think is talked about quite enough, and maybe I haven't done a good enough job talking about this, Major League Baseball and its owners have contracts with low A, with those teams through 2030. So the first year that we would see low A get axed, perhaps, is 2031. And if that's the case, I don't think we're going to see any change in draft strategy until then. And I don't think we'll see a 10-round draft in 2027 or 2028, but I do think we could see it, like laddered and scattered, I guess, where it goes down to 15 rounds in 28, maybe 12 rounds in 2029 and 2030, and then you get down to that 10-round range for 2031 if low A is then eliminated. So I think it's a way for owners to save money. I think it's a way to eliminate more of the minor league high school draft pick, which, you know, owners don't like spending money on high school draft picks. They take a long time to arrive. They're expensive to sign. I think they would prefer guys like Liam Doyle, who could pitch in Major League Baseball right in 2026, guys that give immediate returns. So I think in the long run, it's going to be good for the game because it's going to elevate the popularity of the draft, guys getting to the major leagues quicker. But it is a shame in terms of just, you know, people that really enjoy minor league baseball, enjoy low A, and enjoy the high school draft pick.
I'm going to take that then, because talk about enjoying baseball at the indie ball level for sure, and how that would possibly affect things. There were like 2 dates on the calendar in indie ball that we were like always worried about. It was the end of Major League Spring Training, and it was the end of the first year player draft, because you knew that guys were getting cut, and of course you're going to go with the affiliated guys. Like that's the best way to get your team better, but also like the making sure that your team is seen as like a valuable asset. So do you think that this potential trimming of the minor leagues, like we saw it after COVID, and then the formation of like these partner leagues, is that like a way for the major leagues to have their cake and eat it too, that you're going to probably see expanding as the minor leagues possibly disband?
Yeah, I think Major League Baseball would probably begin investing in some way, shape, or form in independent baseball. I don't know what that's going to look like, but you're already seeing them invest in things like the MLB Draft League, getting extended looks at guys that they're not able to get looks at otherwise. Listen, there's no way to look at this other than it is this sport shrinking, right? There's only so many roster spots in organized professional baseball and independent baseball combined. And if you eliminate low A, you are inherently eliminating roster spots across the landscape of the sport. So this would impact, those guys that are on the fringes of the independent rosters. They would be getting replaced by guys that are being released from minor league rosters. So yeah, it's like that's the toughest part of all this is you want to see guys get opportunities to grow and develop. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter at what level. It could be independent baseball, it could be low A baseball, it could be anywhere. And this is inherently, passively eliminating spots and opportunities. There's no way around it.
Yeah, so going from the minor leagues to the draft where you really specialize in your content, I wanted to kind of touch on a recent article that you had wrote about this week. Who are some of your favorite draft prospects in this 2026 cycle?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've written up a lot of them. I mean, guys that I especially like at the top. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Justin LeBron. I think he has the highest ceiling of any player in this class. I think he has a higher ceiling than Rock Chalowski. I think Justin LeBron could be peak Javier Baez once he gets to the big leagues. I know the fielding percentage doesn't show it, but I think he's the most spectacular, talented, athletic defensive shortstop in the 2026 class. And because of that, I think someone's going to take him pretty early. I'm a big fan of Von Lackey. I think he's a 5-tool catcher, a guy that is going to be able to move quickly into Major League Baseball. He can run, he can throw. There's power there. And then I think, I'll throw one more out. And this guy might be an option for the Cardinals at pick 11. We'll see if he's still on the board. But Chris Hakopian is, for me at least, the best pure hitter in this class. I think he has some of the same traits that guys like Matt Shaw had, like Brooks Lee had. To a certain extent, Jacob Wilson. I just think he is as polished as you can find for the 2026 class. And yeah, it's a deep draft for high school pitchers, high school hitters, and it's a pretty good draft for college pitchers or college hitters as well.
I'm going to stay on the high school side of things. Just talking about the evaluation process. Being a high school coach and seeing the teams that my team is and also who they play, like you can have some guys that look very, very good, but they're facing 64-mile-an-hour fastballs. So when you're talking about the evaluation process for high schools, like there is such a variance of talent. So like what do you look at? But also when you're looking at things like PBR, are you afraid of guys that are just trying like NFL, like just get draft ready as far as like the numbers that they put up go, especially high school level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've never been asked that question, but it's a question that we talk about constantly, right? So the one thing about scouting is there's we call them show ponies, right? Like guys that show up to showcases and have these outrageous tools, but then you put them in a lineup, you let them play baseball, and they can't play baseball. They can hit a mile, they can run super fast. I call them the Kimbo Slice of baseball. If you guys are, old enough to remember Kimbo Slice. Super, super talented, outrageous tools, outrageous physical specimen. Couldn't fight, right? Like that's what we're talking about with some of these kids. So there's a balance between seeing all of those tools and seeing all of those tools on the field. I think you can still spot those tools regardless of the level of competition to a certain extent. You can still see how a kid runs and throws and defends and all those different things. But the hit tool and to a lesser extent, the power projection are tough. That is why some of these summer high school tournaments that we get, the area code games, the East Coast Pros, the perfect game events, the USA Baseball, I try to aggregate all of that data, all of those performances into the player profiles over on the website so readers can get a look at, hey, here is what these top prospects did against elite competition. And I think that's what scouts in the industry are trying to do as well, just trying to see what does the sample look like when these guys are actually facing, similar talent, guys that they're going to see in the low minors, because ultimately that's what's up, right? You're going to get drafted in July. You're going to see 92 to 95 every night, and you're going to see a good breaking ball every night. How did you fare against that in high school?
Well, as like the Cardinals Brain Trust try to, decipher who is a show pony and, who's a legit dude, the Cardinals own 6 of the top 86 picks this year by virtue of restructuring their luxury tax status and the Brendan Donovan trade that landed them the 2 additional Comp B picks. This also gave the Cardinals the second largest bonus pool amount to work with this year as well. Can you explain what kind of an advantage that gives Randy Flores, Zach Mortimer, Chaim Bloom in this cycle in terms of like you described there? It seems to be a very strong and deep draft, and so the Cardinals are going to have a lot of in their war chest to really attack this with a big war chest.
Yeah, I mean, it allows them the opportunity to take shots. I mean, that's really what it is. When you have that much money, you don't have to spend so they'll be on the board like number 11, right? Pick number 11, 13. Pick number 13, yeah. Right in there. Yeah. So let's say they go under slot and they give someone 200,000 less than their bonus pool there. Well, all of a sudden you got 5 more picks in the top 100 picks. You can go after that $3 million high school arm, that Ryan Sloan, for example, that maybe you couldn't afford in most other years, but now you're back on the board at pick, 50, 52, somewhere in there. Let's say you're back on the board at pick 52 and one of these, $3 million high school arms that you didn't think that you were going to have access to is still on the board. A guy like, let me just pull this up. How about like a Jensen Hirschkorn, right? I've got Hirschkorn ranked as my number 36 prospect on the board right now. There are going to be teams in the 30 to 45 range that simply can't afford him. They just can't. He might be asking for $3 million. He might be asking for $3.5 million. And if you are the New York Yankees or the New York Mets or a team that only has so many picks, the Padres, the Dodgers, you don't want to take a high school pitcher and burn your whole bonus pool in that round. The Cardinals have that luxury. You guys can save that money. You can go after the kid that turns into Clayton Kershaw in 5 years. You can go after the kid that turns into a frontline starter for the next, decade of Cardinals baseball. I like to always point to, just because it's recent, Ryan Sloan. I mean, Ryan Sloan right now is a top 25 prospect in the sport. The Mariners drafted him at pick 33, I think. They gave him the value of the number 20 pick in the draft. They way overspent to get to him. And now they have a top 20, a top 25 pick in the sport because they had that money. And that's what the Cardinals have. They have the ability to take a shot. And I think knowing the way that Chaim Bloom likes to operate and knowing the way that Zach Mortimer and Randy Flores like to operate, their insistence on pitching, I think they're going to walk away with a high school pitcher here that is a very, very high ceiling guy. Look at a guy like, and I don't mean to get heavy-winded here, I would circle a guy like Coleman Borthwick. I think Coleman Borthwick, for everything that the Cardinals have valued in the past and everything that I think they still value today, I think Coleman Borthwick would be a sensational fit.
I like how you're talking about the potential to save draft picks for certain teams and stuff like that, especially as I look at like my own process as soon as I saw Johnny Manziel getting drafted and my name wasn't called yet, I'm like, so I guess this is the point where the draft picks don't really matter, because it was like there's still 40 rounds back in that day, but. Mm-hmm. But that's neither here nor there. But I'll leave mine kind of broader because I know Jake wanted to nerd out a little bit here, so I'll give him his time here at the end. The international draft, is that something that you see ever happening, or how are we going to stop exploiting these 12-year-olds? Basically, is my other question.
It's a great question. I think there are so many cooks in the kitchen with the international draft right now that it's a very, very muddy, complex problem to fix. I think they're going to try and add it in this next CBA, but the way that economy works, the way that academies pay for players to join their academies, the way that agents and bosses, strike deals with players to get them into those academies, and agents signing these players on at the age of 14. There's so many. The thing about these international prospects, and you don't read about it as much as people probably should, so-and-so might sign for $5 million. They might take home 1.5 of it because the agent gets a cut, the academy gets a cut, the boss gets a cut, their families will take some of that money back for having raised them. And all of a sudden this guy, this kid that doesn't speak English is 16 years old. He's never seen $1 in his life, is just given $1.5 million. $3.5 million went to people that aren't him. And they're signed up for verbal agreements, at the age of 13. It's a very muddy, broken system. And I think even though those handshake deals are illegal, you would be setting all of them on fire. You would be putting these players, these kids and their families at risk because they're leveraged against these deals that are handshake deals with their bosses, for example. You'd be ripping those contracts up and putting them into a draft where they might get a third of the money that they thought they were going to get. So it's a really complicated situation. There's no way that they would ever combine the domestic draft and the international draft. That's never going to be one draft. People can get rid of that idea today. But I think you rip the Band-Aid off. I think for the betterment of the game, for the betterment of parity, for the betterment of the wellness of these players, at least from 2030 and beyond, once we are starting fresh, it's what needs to happen. I'm just not sure anyone's ever going to be able to get it across the finish line because so many people have so much to lose.
So I want to go back to, we touched on Chaim Bloom and Zach Mortimer and Randy Flores, and this question comes to us from one of our other writers. His name's Gabe Simons, normally on, but it was a little bit under the weather, so he did want to have a question asked. He asked, the sample size has not been large, but how would you describe the Cardinals' quote-unquote type when drafting when compared to the previous regime, and are there players who fit this draft that would be very Bloom picks in 2026? You referenced Borthwick and Hirschkorn are a couple of names that you could see the Cardinals being able to target just by virtue of their draft pool status. But in terms of fit or type and the guys that they targeted last year, who are a couple names that Cardinals fans could kind of circle and maybe pay a little bit closer attention to because they kind of fit that profile or that mold of what the Cardinals might seek this year?
I think what you saw from the Cardinals in 2025 is more going to be what you see from them going forward. The big conference, big body, hard-throwing pitcher with field of spin and up the middle prospects like Weatherholt, like Ryan Mitchell, for example. I think that's the path to success in Major League Baseball is pitching these corner profiles, these corner prospects that had big power, but were destined for first base, for right field, for third base. And when those players, struggle, especially defensively, there's nowhere for them to go. There's only one first baseman. There's only one designated hitter. And for a long time, there wasn't a designated hitter in the National League. So I think you'll continue to see the Cardinals push for up the middle players that can play a more dynamic brand of baseball. The guys that I would look at in this class, I would look at a guy, I would specifically, if I was the Cardinals, look on the dirt because there's a ton of outfield prospects right now with the Cardinals. Not a lot of up-the-middle infield prospects for the Cardinals right now. I would look at a guy like Eric Becker with Virginia. I think he makes some sense. I think they would probably prefer to go with a little more upside. Maybe a guy like Jacob Lombard falls in their lap, though he's got some hitability concerns. And then I would start looking at, the kids like Tyler Spangler or James Clark or maybe Tyler Bell, the shortstop at Kentucky. All of those guys fit on the dirt. They play up the middle. They project to stay up the middle. And I think they make the most sense. And in terms of guys that I think could make sense for the Cardinals on the mound, there's a lot of big body strike throwers that throw hard in this class. Logan Schmidt is a high schooler out of Southern California. He's a lefty, 6'4", 230, that I think makes some sense. I think you could look at guys like Liam Peterson from Florida. He's 6'5", 230. Cam Pluke, Coastal Carolina, 6'6", 220. These are all guys that look like starting pitchers that touch 97, 98, 99 miles an hour and have field of spin. And I don't know what happened along the way, but over the course of the, I would say 2019 to 2023, 22, the Cardinals just seem to kind of lose their way in the draft with going after those types of players. So I know I rattled off like 6 or 7 guys, but those are the types of players that I think St. Louis should continue to target.
Jake, I'll let you keep going.
Awesome.
Make sure you got your stuff.
Yeah, sure. Based on your most recent big board update, who are some of the names that you think could be in play for the Cardinals at 13? With the obvious caveat that this could all change in 2 weeks from now. Right. So like, who are the names that are kind of floating in that 10 to 15 range, or that again that might be a Cardinal? So you mentioned Eric Becker. I think of maybe like a Chris Hakopian from Texas A&M, right? That's where he plays at. So like a couple of those names would, because he has that combination of contact and power in his profile. So is that somewhere that maybe might be in play for the Cardinals?
I think if the Cardinals see Chris Hakopian as a player that can play second base long term, they have conviction that he can play second base. I think he makes a ton of sense. I think Becker makes some sense, but just kind of knowing what the Cardinals liked last year in the draft, and knowing the strength of this draft and the way that they could attack it, I would look at a guy like Liam Peterson from the University of Florida personally. Like that's where I would really kind of hone in on, or one of the high school left-handed pitchers, the Carson Bolemans, like I said, the Liam Petersons, the Logan Schmidt is another high school lefty. These are all big body guys that throw hard and have field to spin. I think the Cardinals can get their infielders that they're looking for a little bit later in this draft. I think you can look at a guy like Connor Como, who is a high school second base, third base, shortstop, 6'5", 200 pounds. I think you look at like Luke Williams, who is a high school shortstop, 70, 80 grade runner. I think you could look at a guy like a Trevor Condon or a Taj Marchand. Point is, I think the Cardinals may have more opportunities to land more pitching, and they did well in that last year. More pitching at the top of the draft, and then kind of flex their financial muscles, flex all that bonus pool spending with pick. I don't know where they're at. I think it's like 33 and 50 or 36 and 50, something like that. That's where I would see them take their shots. I expect them to take a high schooler in both of those two spots, and probably an arm with pick 13. If I was just guessing, it's March. That would be my guess.
When you look a little bit further down the board, so second, third, fourth round, the back half of the top 100, like who are a couple names that maybe Cardinals fans could pay attention to that are kind of floating around that area in terms of big board?
Yeah, tough to say. I think when you look at what the Cardinals did with Tanner Franklin. Tanner Franklin was the 6'4" reliever at Tennessee, throwing 99, doing some good stuff, but had never shown the ability to start. I look at a guy like Carson Wiggins, right, in the third round for the Cardinals, if he's there. Carson Wiggins is Jackson Wiggins' little brother, who's now with the Cubs. Tore his UCL in 2025. He will maybe pitch for Arkansas in like May of 2026, maybe late April in 2026. This is a guy that's 6'5", 230 pounds. He's only really pitched in relief for Arkansas, but another guy that's up to 100 miles an hour. He sits 98 to 101 miles an hour in bullpen showings. Has not quite developed the breaking ball yet, but like this is the blueprint for what Tanner Franklin was. Like it's 80% fastballs and just trying to figure out how to throw a breaking ball. And I think Carson Wiggins is the type of kid that, especially if he doesn't pitch in 2026 and doesn't show what he's capable of, maybe he slips to the Cardinals pick in the third round. He seems like the type of project that the Cardinals would do really well with.
Well, since we have enough time, I can fit one more in here. And I didn't think we would get to the Cardinals-related stuff, but I'll throw this out. JJ Weatherholt, right? He's had an unbelievable start to his major league career. First big league hit and home run in game 1, first walk-off hit in game 2 of the season. Coming out of West Virginia in 2024, he was a candidate to go 1-1 overall. What was it about JJ in your estimation that makes him so special and high-end as a prospect, now big leaguer, that Cardinals fans can allow themselves to get excited over? Because whenever you take into consideration like a Nolan Gorman or a Jordan Walker or even a Dylan Carlson, like these guys, it either didn't quite match up to the hype, or it's taken a lot longer for the hype to come to fruition for the other guys, right? So, like, when it comes to Weatherholt, like, what is it about his profile that Cardinals fans can allow themselves to actually get excited over this being an immediate impact piece?
Yeah, he was number 1 on my board going into February or into January of 2024, and I think he would have gone 1 or 2 had his hamstrings just not continued to blow out on him at West Virginia. I mean, the guy could barely play on the field. When he did play, he DH'd. I think he got back and he played like 3 games at shortstop, re-injured his hamstring, started DHing again. I mean, people were just worried if this was a chronologically busted soft tissue profile. But every time JJ Weatherholt played, he hit. And his pitch selection skills were elite, and his exit velos were well above average for a guy his size. Travis Bazzana gets all of the love, all the acclaim for the batted ball profile that he had in 2023 and 2024. Weatherholt was better in 2023. He was just a better overall hitter, but he couldn't stay on the field. So his combination of strength that he's gained, his plate discipline, his pitch selection skills, and his ability to take the barrel absolutely everywhere in the zone. It is a very, very simple swing, and it's a swing that doesn't really look like it'll slump. I mean, everyone goes through slumps, but JJ Weatherholt doesn't have the swing that will go through a 3.5 week, 4 week slump where he has a 50% strikeout rate. It won't happen. It's like Kevin McGonigal. Like, it just works. I'll be interested to see what his ceiling is, because he's not the biggest guy in the world. I don't see JJ Weatherholt as the type of guy that's going to slug 30 home runs a year, but if he is a guy that hits 285 with 24 to 28 home runs, he's going to go to 4 or 5 All-Star games. And the only question that I really have left with JJ is, where is he going to play on the field? Not this year, because he's still young, still athletic, but he's a big kid. He's a big guy. How quickly does he move to third base full-time? Like, no chance of playing second base anymore, no chance of playing shortstop anymore. This is a third base DH profile. A little bit of Matt Carpenter in the way that the whole profile works, and you guys know Matt Carpenter well. If you got a Matt Carpenter career out of JJ Weatherholt, man, you run to the fences for that. That's awesome.
Joe, thank you so much for joining us. But before we let you go tonight, because we're running up against it here, tell us where fans can go to find all of your great work and coverage of the draft, including your Patreon subscribers at, the 3 different tiers of very worthy content.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words, Jake. So if you're really into the draft, if you're really into prospects in amateur baseball, you can go to patreon.com/overslot. We have a weekly podcast where we have different scouting directors on. I do believe we're going to have Jake Mortimer on here shortly, so you guys can look forward to that. We can talk a little bit of Cardinals baseball. And then as we look over to just written content, overslotbaseball.com is where you're going to find all of my news and analysis and anything and everything that has to do with the draft. And yeah, if this is your thing, that's where to go.
Excellent. And Scott, do you have any last questions or anything for Joe remaining?
No, I appreciate it. I think it's impressive to be able to dive so deep into so much stuff beyond just the SEC, like you're saying, to be able to, what we think, properly evaluate talent from just all over the place. So it really helps be able to see and hear that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Joe, and hopefully we can have you on a little bit closer to the draft again, and maybe get a little bit more as things solidify a little bit more, and we can kind of look at that broader picture as things come into focus. But for writer Scott Plaza and for Joe Doyle of Overslot, I am your host, Jake Wood. We will talk to you all next week as we tackle our first reader mailbag episode of the year. Have a great week, St. Louis, and thanks for listening.